unless she's open to that. Can you hear me?
Who are you talking to?
Oh, there's Arvin now.
What?
What?
What? Who are you talking
You're
to?
recording it now? Oh, please don't record what you said. We're talking about unemployment with phone.
Unemployment?
Oh yeah, here you go. You can apply for unemployment too.
Me?
Yeah.
Already did
Oh yeah, you did. Okay.
last week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, you could not. What happened?
But your 401k plan, they won't text you. I just found that out because I pulled out my 401. They holding back about $4,000. But today I just found out they won't charge you that tax.
Because of this.
Yeah, they'll give you the full amount. That's what they're talking about. So I don't know. Let's see.
Okay. Good.
I'm waiting for
Debbie.
Debbie. So she can take over. She's going to be taking over the controls when she gets on. So let me just get to her stuff. Where are you? Well, I'm supposed to get her stuff going on. So let's. There you go. I'll do a little share until she gets on. Where's my share?
No, I don't see it yet.
Does anybody even know how to use Zoom? I don't know how to use Zoom.
Yeah, we all know.
Did I ask you?
Yes.
Darn it.
Matt, I'm the new Matt now. Oh, there you go.
Free advertising for Debbie. Yeah, you guys heard this one recently? Show you in a minute. These idiots are already starting to do their nonsense. See that part? He's doing a 9/11 investigation on Trump.
Oh my goodness.
It's unbelievable. The virus hasn't even completed or nothing's done. He's already jumping the gun. All right, whatever. I'm just waiting for Debbie to come on. Hey, Alicia. Yes. I better put my headphones on like this. What else? Any questions so far? This might be the biggest group so far.
7.
There's Debbie. Hey, Debbie. So what I want you to do, I'm going to unshare, stop sharing. And then Debbie, I want you to go down at the bottom to your share and take over the controls. Can you do that for me, please? She should be coming on board. So.
Hold on here.
Debbie's a rookie, so forgive her, please.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so share. What do I need to do?
It says share and share your screen.
Okay.
It'll give you the screen that you want to share.
So it says screen. Okay.
Connie.
And then
Click share. The bottom right, it says share. Just click that button and it will show your screen to everyone.
okay, got it. Oh, because I have share content. It says screen, but then when I do that, it's to do record.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. It'll record on your side. It's recording on my side too.
Okay, so now I need to virtual background, minimize meeting.
If it doesn't, I can always open up you can talk, and then what I can do is open up your flyer that you sent me, and I'll just walk through it if you like. If that's okay with you, Debbie.
I'm okay. I'm sorry that I'm such a novice.
That's okay. So let me do a share here. Debbie's going to talk. So Debbie, just tell me when to move. So this is
Okay,
what she's
so-
talking about, is the why pay taxes now. Go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, so first of all, hi everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here with you guys. It's fun to learn new ways of doing our meetings and classes and education. So the topic for today is about 1031 exchanges, and the question that we would want to ask, that seems logical, is why pay our taxes now? Why not use the proceeds from a sale, a property that we're selling, all of it, not what's left over, to buy more investment property? So we're gonna investigate this by means of the 1031 exchange. So now, perfect. The next slide is this. Back down. It says what is 1031. We're going to talk about that now. So we hear 1031 exchange. So we're going to talk about is what exactly is this exchange, a 1031 deferred exchange. We hear people talk about it being tax-free, and I think that's a little misleading, because with the 1031 deferred exchange, this is a type of a transaction that allows an investor to defer their capital gains on a sale of a property by exchanging it into another property. Now, the tax code talks about it needs to be referred to as like kind. And what that means is that the type of property that would qualify for a 1031 is investment, and like kind would be that they buy more property that's used for investment purposes. So we're going to talk a little bit more about like kind in the next slide. This gives us an example of all the different, properties that a person can exchange into or out of. So they may have a property that the center is the property they're selling. And let's just say, for example's sake, this is an investment property, a single family investment property. So they can take that property and sell it and buy raw land. Now, people say, how can that be? Because land doesn't have, there's no income. But according to the tax code for IRS, land has been defined as an investment property. And the main reason is because of the use. Nobody's using it, basically. So it's not being used for personal purposes. So reason for that. So it qualifies. Also, we're going to go up clockwise. We exchange out of a single family investment. We can go into the same thing again. Or the next one, maybe now it's time to go into multifamily. So we might have exchange out of single family, and we want to get a duplex, triplex, fourplex, whatever it may be. Absolutely fine. People wonder if commercial property is okay, if they have a single family investment. Absolutely, no problems. But then there's other types of properties, like air rights. That's something that can be purchased, and it's considered real estate in certain states, just as long as the state we're working with considers air rights as property real estate, then it's exchangeable. Same thing with oil and gas rights. There's people that exchange oil and gas rights and royalties, and it can be a beautiful investment. Some people, maybe they're done with having the multifamily resident or a single family investment property or something else, commercial property, and they just don't want to put the work into it. Oil rights and royalties can be a great deal. Could be a great option. And then the last two, one is the DST, the Delaware Statutory Trust. And this is an interesting type of investment because this allows the taxpayer to go into an institutionalized type of property, and they can buy a percentage of it. It's handled by securities brokers. It can give an option for someone that's maybe retiring and they want to be done with managing property, and so they want to sell their units or whatnot so they can buy that. And then the last is, there are different co-ops, like in New York and different places in California. We just need to find out if they're viewed as real estate. And people can buy, if there's lease land, that's considered as real estate as long as they at least 30 years or more in options. So it just gives us a nice breakdown.
Let me just stop you on this one. By the way, on this setup, securities and stock options, annuities with real estate portfolios, or you can also shelter it in there as well. It's just to give you a heads
Yes.
up that you may not know it. Go ahead.
And just real quick on that is sometimes it's a little negative. People like, you know, you as a real estate agent, you may want to have both sides of the transaction, the sale property and the replacement property. But this may be a sale that you can represent a client on that would have never sold if they didn't have an option like this. So it could open a door.
Right, go ahead.
Now, excuse me.
Oh, hold on a sec. What are air rights? That's what Amber is talking about.
So certain people, so for example, in New York, I'm going to use that as an example because I had a client that had this situation. There was a building that they were buying, and they built on one side of the street, and then the building on the other side of the street that they were buying. And there was like this bridge that connected them up high between these buildings. That bridge, even though it's not connected to the ground, is considered air rights. So they purchased the air rights for a bridge that connected both buildings. So that has a value just like real estate.
Just like an easement of a kind, in a way.
Exactly. Does that make sense? Okay.
Go ahead.
And we don't see much of that here. It's commercial, and it's you know, in large cities that you may see that, like, you know, New York or Chicago, things like that. Now, we talked about what they can do. Let's talk about what a person cannot do with the 1031. So first of all, as of January 2018, personal property, which was something that could have been in the past if it was used for business purposes, has been eliminated from the tax code. So there's no personal properties anymore, that personal property that can be exchanged. So the breakdown of that is businesses, machine, equipment, vehicles like FedEx used to do. We used to do all of FedEx exchanges when they would sell old trucks to buy new trucks. Not anymore. Stocks and bonds are not exchangeable. Now, when we talked about previous DSTs, those are types of exchanges that go into real estate that are handled by the securities world, but that is still real estate. A traditional stock, Apple, whatever, that is, you sell, you buy, you sell, you pay the tax on the gain. That is not exchangeable. And the last thing that's brought out is that's not exchangeable is the primary residence. But let me give you a little caveat though. Primary residence, as I think we talked about last time, allows, the way that works, it's under the tax code of, it's referred to as the 121. The taxpayer owns it and uses the property 2 years or 2 of the last 5 years, then they can be protected from a capital gains event if they're single up to 250 or married 500. Now that's tax-free money. We're talking in a tax-deferred exchange, we're talking about tax-deferred money. So there's a big difference.
Just 1 second, sorry, Debbie. As of 2016 in the books also, it says 26 months in your principals books, by the way. Keep that in mind. Go ahead, Debbie.
It says 26 months?
Yep.
Not 24?
No. They added 2 more months as of the new book came out.
But I think that got, okay, I'll find.
We'll have to find out. We'll find out.
Because our legal department said that never went through.
Okay.
Never, but it was talked about that that's what they wanted to do. But we can verify that. But the reason why I wanted to talk about primary residence exclusion, quick, just as a side point, is if somebody, there's times where you can convert. So for example, somebody has a primary residence and say they have $1 million gain and they are married. So the first 500 of that gain is protected. The last 500 they would have to pay taxes on. Some taxpayers are afraid to sell their primary residence because they don't want to pay that tax. They really want to sign down. So the tax code allows them, if in the last 5 years, the going first 2 years, the last 5 years is still a rental. So say they owned it for 30 years, 29 are primary, and 31 they rent 2 years, and before the 5th year is up. And only in this situation get their 1030, they can get their 120 exclusion. Last 5 years they have 2 years, and like in this example, they have 500 over. A 1031 exchange on that leftover month, pay tax. So this is called the 121/1031. So they can utilize both tax shelters. So it's good to know when you're looking for business who you can find, to know that if they have a presence they've owned long enough and the gain is huge, that there are options. You guys can talk to me later about what you want. Okay, any questions on this slide before I move on to this?
And the portion of that 500 that's taxable can be reinvested into another property for them for investment or any others?
It would be used in exchange. They would buy investment property with that. So the first 500 tax-free, do whatever they want. The last 500 it's going to be deferred. Win-win for certain people. Okay. So this is a common question that comes up when somebody does 31 exchange, so and they find out they can't do what they want to do. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that with this slide. Because it asks, how may I hold title in an exchange? So what's very, very important to understand is the taxpayer that owns the property has to be the same taxpayer that buys the property in an exchange. And traditionally, that seems like it shouldn't be an issue. But where it becomes an issue is if perhaps that taxpayer, like on this slide, says maybe it's John Smith. But maybe John Smith to sell as John Smith, but buy in an LLC that he creates. If John Smith is just a single person and it's just a single member LLC, like in the next line down, then that will work, because that's usually set up as what IRS refers to as a disregarded entity. And what that means is that LLC will be set up under the Social Security number of John Smith and not with a taxpayer ID number. If it's a new taxpayer ID number, then it wouldn't be the same taxpayer, because the Social Security numbers don't match on each side. So same taxpayer on the sale side to the purchase side. So if an LLC owns a property and wants to sell it, and they have many members in it, it's not a single member, like third line down, then unfortunately, it's the LLC that's the taxpayer. That LLC needs to be the seller, and that LLC be the buyer. They can't want, like say there's 6 people in that LLC and they all think that they can separate and buy what they want with their percentage. That's not necessarily true. So again, the LLC is the seller, not the individual members, or the LLC is the buyer. If someone wanted to say they're selling a property and there's several people on title and they all own that property as tenants in common, as the last situation, and John Smith is our original tax, he is one of those people that is tenants in common, then John Smith can take his percentage, even though there's other people on title, and he can exchange for the value of that percentage. So this is an example of just making sure that maintain that continuity of who the same taxpayer is in a situation. Another situation that comes up with this is that some people think they want to add another taxpayer to the situation, like a partner to the buy. So if they sold for 500 and if they're buying for 500, the exchanger, to satisfy their exchange requirements, needs to buy for 500. So if they added a partner, it would cause a taxable event for the taxpayer that's doing an exchange, because now they're only buying into perhaps the property instead of 100%. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, now when it comes to an exchange, what's important to know, and I get a lot of taxpayers that call me and a lot of agents that call me in regards to this question that's on this slide. It says, do I need to replace the debt? And it seems to be the most common mistake in people's minds, especially our clients, is that if there's a loan on the sale property and they sell it for 500, but they say there's a $200,000 loan, so the proceeds after, let's say 500 is the net sales price, after the proceeds are 300,000, the taxpayer gets confused, and I think they only have to buy equal or greater to what is the proceeds in escrow, the 300. But the actual facts are, if you want a total deferred exchange, they need to buy equal or greater to what it's sold for. So let's look at this example on the screen. They sold for $1 million after fees. They have 300,000 in a loan, so their equity is 700,000. So to defer the taxes, they need to buy for $1 million, like you see to the right. The only way they for $1 million is they use their 700,000 proceeds or equity, and they to get a new loan to replace a loan that was paid off on the sale. So they need to replace the loan debt. The loan debt doesn't just magically go away. If they don't replace the loan debt, like in this example, 700,000 equity, say you use 700,000 to buy something with cash, they will pay taxes on the 300,000 loan debt that they didn't replace. Okay, so it's very important. Now there's other options. One option is, if they don't want to replace loan debt and they have money, they can bring in their own cash. They could still buy for $1 million, but maybe they have 300,000. So they bring in their own cash to the purchase escrow of 300,000. Then they exchange funds of 700,000. Now they relieve themselves loan debt responsibility. They paid it off by bringing new cash to the transaction. Any questions on that? Okay, let's talk about vacation.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes, I can.
So back on that, if you go back to that slide, so before that you were saying that people could do, so let's say they sold that $1 million property and they were married, so 500,000 of that is not taxable. Could they buy, like how does that 50-50 thing work in this situation?
Okay. If it's 121, going back to that, right? The combination of both laws.
Yeah.
What'll happen is, this is an excellent question for us. What happens is, see, people sort of calculate what that be for the investment portion.
Debbie, you're breaking up a lot. Maybe, do you have multiple windows open? Just curious.
No, but maybe I'll take my headphones. I should do that. Hold on, let me take my headphones off. Can you hear me now?
You're a little bit quieter. Let me see.
Can you hear me? Let me turn it up. I think my headphones are running out of battery.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me now? No?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk loud.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So what'll happen in the scenario of the 121-1031 is that EPA will math figure out exactly how much loan debt may be required on the five, like my example of 5,000 left over, right?
Mhm.
They may do the math on what loan debt, and that loan debt may not have to, in that situation, they may not have to replace the loan debt if there's loan debt on there, because they own that house for a long time, and now the last 2 years they just had it as a rental, so they may prorate that loan debt in, like whatever years owning it, and the last 2 years would be the prorated amount. They figure out how much in the last 2 years. CPA would be the one that would figure it out. I've had clients where the CPA has calculated out and they did not have to replace the loan debt, and they just had a certain amount of cash to replace. And I've had other CPAs with other clients calculate it out, and they may have some minimal loan debt to replace as the investment portion of that property. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Okay, so the most important thing to know is that the CPA is the most important person in that scenario to give us the math of what loan debt they have to be replaced and how much money they have for their 1031. So the CPA is the one that gives those figures and helps us out. Every client that does a lot of times do a conference call, that CPA and the client, and then we all get it, we talk about everything, and then they go do their homework and come back and give us numbers to work with.
Okay.
Get the CPA involved into the transaction.
Got it.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? I took it off of my headphones.
Yeah,
You were good too.
sounds a little bit clearer.
Okay, I'm so sorry, guys.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. You guys want to talk about vacation homes? Good. Now, this can be an interesting topic because people, have had up to this point properties of VVRO, short-term vacation rentals. So IRS did come out with a procedure that broke this down into how we can tell what is a vacation home versus investment property. So the criteria is on the screen. So basically, what's really important is that the property really should be owned for at least 24 months. And in those 24 months, it has to show at minimally that it was rented for 15 days a year in each 12-month periods. And it's not used more than 14 days of the year, or 10% of the time rented. So what that means is the taxpayer gets whatever's greater. So if they rented it for 300 days a year, that 10% calculation would be 30 days that owner can use that property without it being a second home. But beyond that, if they rent it for 6 months and use it for 6 months, it would be classified as a second home, not a investment property. And what makes this important, this classification, is a second home. If a property is truly used as a second home, there are no shelters to protect them from a taxable event. They pay taxes on that gain if it qualifies as a second home. So this is why it's really important to have this this criteria here, so we can help the taxpayer know, and I could do this for you, help them understand what status their property currently would be, second home or investment, using the math here.
So can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So a second home is if the owner stays in the house for half the year and they rent it out half the year, is that right?
Yes. And a second home is any used more than 2 weeks a year or 10% of the time rented. Then it falls into a second home category. So if somebody, go ahead, Amber.
Go ahead.
No, it's to say, so somebody said, we have it in Big Bear. We use it probably in the summertime for about 3 months, but we rent it the rest of the time. Well, 3 months is 90 days. It most likely in one given year would that situation would still put it in a second home category, not investment. So use will define what category it goes into.
And if it's a second home, you cannot do a 1031 exchange with it? Or you
Yes, it does not qualify for 1031 exchange.
Got it. Thanks.
So if anybody's in that situation and you need help, just call me and I can help analyze it to figure out what category it really falls into. Because if it does into a second home category, if they rent it out for the next 2 years or 2 tax returns, then they can now take it from a second home to investment and do an exchange. So it may take some advanced planning. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about, are we, any other questions on that? Okay.
That's
So
okay.
let's talk.
We got 10 minutes,
talk-
so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Now let's talk about the tax liability. And this is why it's important to figure out what category the property goes into. If it's a second home when they have to pay tax, or if it's investment property. And if they decide to not do an exchange, I've had clients come to me and agents come to me that said, this is what the client says, I'm sick and tired of investment property. I just want to sell the property. I do not want to do an exchange, and I want to pay the tax. And they're adamant. Well, those are the people that I am more afraid of than anybody else, because their emotion is moving them. And as this slide we're going to talk about, that taxable event could be huge, and they have no idea. They're just letting their emotion drive them. So when I have a person that strongly does not want to do an exchange, I make them talk to their tax person so they can get an idea what that taxable event will be, and then they can make it to them. Because I'm okay if they don't do the exchange. I just want them to do what's right for them. Because what happens is those people that say, I don't want to exchange, and they're adamant, call back about 8 months later and they're crying, saying they need to do an exchange on something that's too late to do it. And they're crying because they just found out from their tax person how much taxes they were going to have to pay. So this will help circumvent that whole stress by helping them understand they need to talk to their tax person so they can make an educated decision. Now, let's talk about the taxes. In the blue section, it says up to 20%. That's the federal tax. So it's 15, it could go up to 20%. Traditionally, it's 15% because that's usually the average. It's based on wages. It goes up, the average wage for people in the United States. The 20% is when it's $400,000 income or greater annually. So that's federal. Then we go down to the rust. It says up to 13.3, that rust looking color. That is state. So the state tax is between 9.3 to 13.3. 13.3 is for corporations, LLCs. 9.3 is usually for the traditional mom and pop. Usually on the 593, it talks about 12.3. So we always just quote 12.3. And if their taxes are lower, then yay for them. But that's the state. So now we have 15 and approximately 12.3. The next figure, that 25% in the orange, that is for what we refer to is recapturing the depreciation. And what that means is during the life of owning it as an investment property, tax depreciated that property. So the total depreciation they've taken on every year that it's been a rental gets tallied up by their tax person, and they have to pay back 25%. This is a different tax. It's not a capital gains tax. So you have capital gains on one side, then you have recaptured depreciation on another. So right there, if they depreciated it for $100,000, 25% of $100,000 is $25,000 separate tax they have to pay on top of state and fed. So that's a lot of money. The next is the 3.8. what we refer to as Obamacare. It's a Medicare tax. And if the taxpayer is single and they have passive gain in their life, not only just from the sale, but other passive gain from stocks or whatnot, and if they're single and if it's over 200,000, then every dollar after 200,000 has that special 3.8 tax. If they're married, their threshold is 250. So everywhere after 50, they pay 3.8 tax. So we can see on this on this picture here, the gray to the right, that shows you, that small gray shows you what's not taxed. So over 2/3 transaction is basically taxed. That's a lot of money that people could lose. So that's why we want people to understand before we all just buy off on the fact that they don't want to do an exchange. We really want them to talk to their tax person so they can really make an educated decision. And I was one of those people years ago. I sold an investment property because my husband was sick and I wanted to pay some medical bills, and I just thought that was the way to go. By the time we had great gain on it. By the time I sold that property, I did not do an exchange, which I knew better, but I did not. And by the time I got done paying my taxes, I had no money left to pay the medical bills. I made a dent on it, and it was heartbreaking. So I'm very passionate about this because even I succumbed to this about 15 years ago. And it really was a mistake of something that I've done.
So hold on, guys, just to remember, keep this in mind, this slide. You guys can print it out and keep it in your portfolio, especially when we're dealing with this absentee ownership, guys. This is something we can actually mail to them also, just to keep them in mind, because we can always talk about it when you do a live one-on-one with them.
And if you have any clients that want, want more to discuss this, you're welcome to tie me in. We can do Zoom together with your client or whatever. And I would be more than happy to give them this breakdown as accurate as I can for them. Okay. Now, this is where I'm going to stop it for today, because next time we get together, I want to take it from this point, the listing appointment, and everything that we look at on the listing appointment, and then we're going to talk about the different types of exchanges and the times and things like that. So this is what, in my opinion, what we're going to talk about next time are the things that you personally want to pay attention to when you have a client that does an exchange.
Perfect. Thanks, Debbie. So we'll start at this one next Thursday, 11 o'clock, especially Gary, you're going to bring donuts.
I want one.
Digital donuts. You always digital.
You got it.
Any questions for
Just one
Debbie?
question.
Go one at a time, please. Kelly's got a question. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Ken. Hi, Kelly.
Hi. Debbie, a few slides ago, raw land was deemed acceptable for this program, but
Right.
land's not depreciable. So I just
Right.
had a technical question on that.
Go for it.
You just say it's for investment property. It's, long-term investment. You're not actually renting it. Is it still considered to be an investment property, or how do they categorize that?
IRS has specially classified raw land as investment property, even though there's no depreciation taken on it because there's no structures. So there would be no recapture when they sell raw land because there's no depreciation that was taken. But it is in a category of its own, and IRS has put that category in the investment land. And which is because I get farmers that have come to me, like I had last year, a farmer that came to me and sold all this farmland that was worth like $18 million. And they were able to take this non-productive farmland that the family couldn't use anymore for whatever reason, sell in, and it was cash, and put it into investment properties that would make an actual income for them. So it's a beautiful provision for raw land.
If we go a little over, just sign back on, guys.